All right, so for our first video tonight, we're going to be watching this video from Sashko, talking about how RPD became the most hated map in Dead by Daylight. This is very, very topical, considering that it appears to be that we are going to be getting the Nostromo map, as indicated by the Alien teaser, which kind of, you know, in a similar vein of RPD, kind of scares people because it's a very, very iconic indoor map for a, not a game, but a movie. But, you know, putting that one-to-one into Dead by Daylight, you know, with RPD it caused problems, and may potentially do with the Nostromo as well. There's no reason not to put it in the game because it's such an iconic location. But yeah, obviously RPD, when it initially released, was a huge problem, and still in a lot of ways has tremendous issues. So we're going to see them talk about that. But as always, make sure that you click that link that's in the chat right there, or if you're in YouTube right now, click the link in the description below to make sure you like and subscribe to this creator. That way they get the official release of the video supported. But let's go ahead and get started.
The Raccoon City Police Department is one of the 20 realms in Dead by Daylight. Currently, it features two separate maps, RPD East Wing and RPD
Well,
West
Larry's
Wing.
is more balanced than RPD. Larry's is kind of more in the middle, whereas like RPD, both East and West Wing, are killer-sided. East is more killer-sided, but
Even though
more
the
killer-sided
realm
maps.
has only been in the game for a little bit more than
Like
2
the old
years
RPD as
now,
a Resident
it has
fan?
already
I loved
received
Resident
multiple
Resident was my
very
favorite franchise, and I did not like
significant
old RPD.
changes, including completely reworking the original map into two separate ones, along with a few other smaller tweaks. So, in this video we'll be going over the entire history of RPD in Dead by Daylight, and without any further ado, let's get right into it.
But they're playing Silent Hill music. Wait, this is Silent Hill music during the Resident Evil video. Hey, quit
Let's
it.
go back
Stop
in
it.
time to the summer of 2021. Dead by Daylight had just had its 5-year anniversary, and a lot of new players had begun playing the game. Why?
It was the peak.
That was because
It was the peak of the
anniversary
game's
update
population.
included the first ever Resident Evil chapter, which brought the Nemesis, Jill Valentine, Leon S. Kennedy, and the infamous RPD map. The original RPD featured gloomy hallways, quite a bit more mist, and very moody lighting, although not as dark as in the concept art. Even though
At one point they said there was biggest map in the game too.
The game yet, this was an absolutely humongous map, since it was made up of both the east and west side simultaneously. Not only that, but many of the palettes and window votes on the map back then were much stronger than they are now.
Dude, old
example-
Blue Room was so strong. Old Blue Room was so strong. That room was a nightmare. That room was terrifyingly strong. If you lived through playing killer and somebody would loop you in that Blue Room, you are entitled to financial compensation. That Blue Room was stupid.
Example, in the East Office, the hole in the wall that connects it to the press room and that is commonplace in today's RPD didn't exist, which meant that the window vault was incredibly safe.
Yeah.
Even safer than the God window in
God.
the main building of the Garden of Joy map.
So good.
Additionally, the table around the pallet in the East Office
It was so
also much
broken.
bigger, which basically made this a God pallet as well. So, to recap, the East Office featured a God window and a God pallet simultaneously. At least, the window in here was a bit weaker compared to today, but who am I kidding? No one uses it anyway.
Yeah, I tried to
Mind
today.
you,
I got
this is
walloped
only
on.
one example of
It's really
the many
bad.
resources on this map that were much stronger back then. Even though the developers had added quite a bit of new doorways and holes that weren't present in the Resident Evil games, it was still clear that the map wasn't very well suited for DBD gameplay. And since it was a very faithful replication of the Raccoon City police station from the Resident Evil 2 remake, players were quick to realize that it didn't feel very good to play on at all. Excluding of course the utterly incredible visuals, which without a doubt are absolutely mesmerizing.
Resident Evil 2's RPD is one of the best designed maps in like all of gaming, but it is that way because it fits perfectly into the survival horror genre. Like the genre of what the game was trying to achieve, it fits perfectly for that. It does not fit perfectly for an ASIM where freedom of movement is extraordinarily important.
In fact, on the PTB, console players were literally unable to play on RPD since their game would crash every time they loaded into the map. Back when the original RPD was released, Scott Junt made a video calling it the worst map in Dead by Daylight. And to be fair, his arguments were quite reasonable. In the video, he made the conclusion that it takes the same amount of time to go from one side of the map to the other as on Mother's Dwelling, which at that time was the biggest map in the game. Not only that, but
And RPD has 2 floors. RPD has 2 floors. Mother's Dwelling has, you know, a main building and a smokestack that is like 2 floored, but the whole map is 2 floors besides the main hall. That's even more fucking space. Raccoon City Streets or Untitled Chapter and done the Spencer Mansion, so there's a rep from each trilogy. Yeah, like that's what we kept saying. I remember when it first came out, that's what we said, is like have RPD Streets be like the main map, and then you can like go into the courtyard of RPD or something like that. And that would have been way better. Hey Bennett, it's good to see you. Yeah, true. And there's only certain ways to get up, so lot more space than, say, Mother's Dwelling.
But RPD also had many other problems, including the claustrophobic aspects of indoor maps, not being able to find generators as a survivor, and literally being unable to use your power as killers like, for example, Billy. Furthermore, the map also had a 3rd floor, which was accessible by going up the stairs in the library. And this exact fact would begin to cause major problems when the 5.5.0 update was released.
You remember boil-over squads would go up here all the time, put Boon Exponential out? Oh my god.
With the 5.5.0 patch in early 2022, the developers introduced a buff to the perk Boil-Over.
Here it is.
Effect.
Here he is.
You gain 25% wiggling progress when the killer drops from great heights. Now, this on paper doesn't seem that great. However, this was considered one of the most controversial changes in DBD's history. Why? Well, because some maps featured places where the killer was required to drop down after picking up a downed survivor, the boil-over perk was very easily abusable. Spots like this were, for example, the 2nd floor on the main building of the Crotus-Pren Asylum, and, you guessed it, the library in RPD. Along with that, survivors would also bring petrified
bleeding people out up here.
to make sure that no hooks spawned on the top floor. This was absolutely awful for killers, since players usually brought Boon Exponential to make sure that they also couldn't be slugged, which resulted in an infinite loop of killers not being able to hook survivors. Things needed to change, but guess what? Instead of actually nerfing Boil-Over, the developers just chose to add another hook spawn to the upper part of the library. And rightly so, they received quite a bit of backlash for that. Thankfully, 2 patches later, Boil-Over was finally nerfed to how it is today. However, there were still many glaring problems with RPD,
as you shouldn't, Sean, as you shouldn't.
Players were becoming increasingly more frustrated. It was clear that a big rework of the map was needed, and fortunately, Behavior had been listening to the community. On the 2nd of August 2022, the Raccoon City police station was mysteriously renamed to RPD East Wing. Players were quick to speculate that the map would possibly be receiving a rework, and these speculations turned out to be correct. This was an intentional leak by the developers, confirming that the map was going to be split into 2 separate ones.
Which has made it way more tolerable. Way more tolerable.
On the 30th of August 2022, the Resident Evil Project W chapter was released to the public, and with this also came the long-awaited changes to the Raccoon City map. Moving forward, RPD would now be separated into 2 smaller maps, built around the west and east wing, experiencing a considerable reduction in size. The main hall, however, would still be featured on both maps, retaining its original layout.
And the main hall is like the strongest part of this map for killer. That's why this is one of the main reasons the map is killer-sided, not just the indoor map with like stealth killers and stuff like that. Like, this main hall is so easily patrollable and so easily pressurable. And you'll often get both these gens, both this one and the one up at the top. Like, it's extremely easy for killers to patrol and pressure. And it used to be worse, because you used to be able to get one right here in the middle too, like up behind the desk by the statue. It was disgusting. It's so easy to pressure this main hall as killer.
Furthermore,
So easy.
a new outdoor area to the realm was added, which prior to that was completely blocked off and inaccessible to the players. Additionally, several new halls and entrances were added that were previously missing from the original map. These included a hole in the wall of the library,
Yeah, Mr.
a
X
hole
burst
in
in
the
through.
east office, and many more. Moreover, several corridors were widened to make navigation
This was so smart.
easier,
This was
and
smart.
the infamous
This is what they're going to have to do to the Nostromo if they bring it in. They're going to have to widen those hallways. And I bet you they will. They've learned their lesson. Hopefully. They've learned their lesson from RPD. They're gonna wind those hallways.
Top part of the library was made completely inaccessible, outright removing the third floor from the map. All of these changes were great.
True, very,
However,
very true.
players were a little disappointed with this rework, since they expected that the original map would be completely split in half, which wasn't necessarily the case. In fact, some players even claimed that with the new outdoors...
It's not worse. That's a cope. That is hard cope. It is not worse. It is not worse. Oh my gosh. No, it is not worse. You want to go back? You want to go back to boil over up at the top of the library? You want to go back to the blue room, the east office, having that god window? You want to go back to the 3-gen in the main hall? You want that? You want that? That's cope. That's hardcore. No. 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 No.
Area, the East Wing and West Wing maps were almost the same size as the original RPD. Well, at least several pallets were weakened, including the one between the West Office and
they cleaned that up,
and the one in the East Office. Speaking of the East Office, the new hole in the wall also significantly weakened the strength of the window vault, which went from the strongest god window in the game to being slightly weaker than the one in Longwall Jungle Gyms. Furthermore, many pallets also received alternative spawn locations. For example,
yeah, I remember that, because Hatch used to be able to spawn anywhere in RPD. It was the one map in the game where the Hatch could spawn literally on anywhere. It could spawn on all 3 floors for like no reason. So it broke the rules of the rest of the game, and it was just really silly.
The pallet in the West Office could now also spawn here, whereas previously its only spawn location was here. Same goes with the pallet in the East Office, although its new variation is like...
It still can. I have, in the years I've played since they've updated, well, not the years, because it's only been a year, but the year I've played since they did this update of East and West, I've never had it spawn second floor, literally ever. And I've never seen on anybody's stream spawn anywhere on second floor, literally ever. So, I don't think it's in the game anymore. Unless somehow through a year of playing and watching Dead by Daylight, I've just somehow astronomically never seen it happen. Like, yeah, I think it's out.
On the contrary, a new god palette was added to the top of the staircase in the main hall.
Well, every map needs it.
Fact,
like, most maps have a god palette, so it's not like...
There was actually another god palette right on the other side of the stairs,
yeah.
meaning that there were 2 god palettes
I don't know why there were 2. That was silly.
Of each other. Thankfully, this palette spawn was removed for the live release, and we only got the one that we currently have today. There was still, however, one big problem with RPD that needed to be addressed: 3-genning.
Yeah, here we go. This is what I talked about very briefly earlier.
Prior to the Project W chapter, Dead by Daylight received a massive meta shakeup. Many of the previously popular generator defense perks got nerfed pretty significantly, and because of
Overbind
the
meta,
other gen-related killer perks, the generator kicking meta started to arise, and the 3-gen strategy was becoming more and more popular. This issue became even worse when the Knight and the Skull Merchant got released, and RPD was one of the main offenders of their main strategy, since sometimes a total of 3 generators would spawn in the main hall, and the fact that they were so close to each other meant that they could very easily be defended even with only 2 gen defense perks. Survivors were becoming increasingly more frustrated with this boring playstyle, and things needed to change. So, thankfully, many of the strongest killer perks at the time...
I'm going to go out there on a limb and still say that 2 spawning in the main hall is still very, very, very easily defendable and aggressively annoying for a survivor. Having 2 spawn in the main hall is still a lot. That's still... It's still not that great. Considering that, like, the gen spawn can be up in the library balcony with the horse statue, and it can also be in the reception, like the yellow room upstairs. That's essentially, like... It's still a 3-gen.
Times such as Call of Bran and Eruption received very significant nerfs, and the generator spawns in the main hall of RPD got changed in order to not be able to generate such busted setups. Ever since these reworks, I believe that the Raccoon City Police Department has received no further changes, though I may be wrong. Let me know if I missed anything down in the comments, I would really appreciate it. Well, I guess that was it. We went through the entire history of RPD in Dead by Daylight. I've started introducing more music into my videos instead of just having the DBD theme playing all the way.
Yeah, you played Silent Hill music in the middle of an RE video.
But
that was
anyways,
weird.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in
like, and I think with like this, like just to make it like clear, like of course this is better than old RPD. Biggest map in the game, really busted setups, really hard to traverse, like 3-gen setups in the middle of the hall. Like, come on. You don't want that. You don't want that. The way the map is now is probably the best state it will ever be in. Is it still a little wonky and not really fun to play on? Yeah. Some of the spawns, so we were talking about it earlier because we kept getting RPD today. It was like, some of the spawns are wonky because if you don't spawn in the main hall as killer, you know the survivors did, or spawned at that front door, so you essentially without lethal nowhere to go. And I feel like the loops in general are just not very fun on RPD. I can't really like, I don't know how to pretend like place it. It's just like, they're not fun to play on either side. They're so simple. It's just pallet in hallway, pallet in room. You know, it's not like jungle gyms where it's like there's kind of like a strategy going on between like, am I gonna fake the window? Am I gonna go to the window? Can I moonwalk behind this wall and, you know, hit him behind the pallet? You know, it's like there's not really a lot of that play. It's really just walk up. This pallet blocks this entire hallway, so you have to kick it. Or, you know, oh, it's just a weak pallet, so we don't even play it anyway. Like a lot of like, there's not a lot of like creativity to the way you can play on RPD, and I think that's one of the reasons that people don't really talk about and why it feels bad to play on. Is like, I think a good example of like a map that does this slightly better is the meatpacking plant. Because the meatpacking plant on the top, it has a lot of the same things where it's just like pallet blocking entire like area, or really strong pallet over here, and that's like all that's up there. When you go downstairs, you'll have like an L wall, T wall down there. You'll have a long wall, short wall down there. You will have like a jungle gym spawn down there. Like you have formal tiles that do spawn on the map, and you can go play those, and those are a little bit more creative to play than just like drop pallet, drop pallet, drop pallet. And I think that RPD is like that without any formal tiles, where it's just like everything is like drop pallet, play the pallet, and like the windows really aren't good or usable besides like kind of the one in the east office, but it's obviously way weaker than it used to be, as it should be. You don't really use the windows a lot on this map. It's really just drop pallet, play pallet, drop out, play pallet. It's very, like I said, it's very uncreative the way you play on this map, both on Killer and Survivor. So I think it just feels kind of boring to play on for that reason, because there's not a whole lot of creativity in the way you can play the loops on this map, both on Killer and the Survivor side. So I wish they would introduce or you know, put something like that more into the map, but you know, it's probably the best it's going to get. I don't imagine they will change it in any major way again, and I would definitely take this over the old way the map used to be. So at least we have that. So yeah.